What is up YouTube, and welcome back to the Yu-Gi-Oh house, where today we are looking at the best board breakers, hand traps, and tech cards of the upcoming Duelist Nexus meta. Now Duelist Nexus just dropped, so a lot of this is going to be speculative, but I have played in a couple tournaments since the set has dropped, and we are definitely in a much more toxic format than we were just last week. With the Calamity FTK, the Gimmick Puppet Lock, a Rise Heart still being around, and the Towers that is expertly Noir being super consistent to get into now, we are looking at a meta that is going to be incredibly toxic, and having ways to answer these types of boards is going to be very important for certain types of decks, while some are going to be able to play around what they set up. With all of the new things dropping, it's really important to gauge what exactly is better going into this format, and today we're going to be looking at what cards are going to be the most impactful going into this upcoming regional season. Of course, this is going to be pending any sort of ban list that we might get between now and then. Looking into the tier list, we have the top tier or better have it. These are cards that you more than likely want to be maining in your deck. Some of these will be side cards that you better still have in the side, but this is really more intended for cards you really need to have in the main. Great to see are cards that are just a little bit worse than these, where they're not good against every matchup, but depending on your sort of meta or what you might be expecting at like a regional or bigger tournament, these are going to be cards that could be defining in terms of your placement in that certain event. Situational cards are just that. They're incredibly potent and incredibly good, but they really only come up in certain situations. Good inside, I think, is just pretty self-explanatory. These are cards that you could explore in your side. Again, these always cater towards your certain meta or what type of event you are going to. And then Dog Water is Dog Water. I don't know how many cards we're going to have in Dog Water, but these cards are just the ones that in this meta probably don't really have a lot of place and aren't very good. I think Kaijus are in a really interesting spot because Cara is still going to be around despite what a lot of people think with all the new stuff that's coming out and all these new combo decks people are toying with. Cara is probably still the best deck of the format and is probably going to see the most representation at big tournaments. With that being said, I think these are cards that are good in the side. I think there are more main deck ways that can beat these newer combo decks and these newer toys that people are playing with, as well as beating Cara, excuse me. Kaijus find themselves in an interesting spot because they're pretty good against decks like Cash, which is probably still going to be the most represented deck at bigger events. And they're not very good against the FTK variants of combo decks, but against other variants of combo decks, these could be really, really potent. I think this card finds itself good inside simply because I think there are more options to beat both those combo decks and Cara that you can run, but that doesn't mean Kaijus are bad. I know a lot of decks are going to want to run Kaijus just to kind of shut down certain plays, and there's really nothing wrong with that, and I think the side is the better place for it. I don't think we necessarily have to main it anymore. Ash's anytime branded is in the format, and anytime branded has a pretty consistent FTK that they can just give you the Gimmick Puppet, you better have Ash in your main because Branded Fusion is like a +5, +7, whatever it is now. You have to absolutely have this card. At any big event, there's going to be plenty of branded. Even at locals, there's going to be plenty of branded. This card's just too versatile not to have in your deck at this point. It's just really, really solid. Ghost Spell. Depending on the deck you're playing, you'd either put it here or there. If you're playing Vanadium, you put it here because the whole field spell situation, because it's a tuner, can kind of throw you off. But I think if you're any other deck, you could comfortably main this at like 2 if you really wanted it, and at least sided it 2. This card hits pretty much everything in the meta right now, including Cara hitting, of course, like the Birth. It's just a really, really strong card. The only thing that does kind of suck is that in the branded matchup, it can lose to things like branded in red with branded lost up because it negates the activation, but that's really not that important in my opinion. I don't think that's going to be defining in terms of how good or bad this card is. The versatility of this card right now is just at a really, really high level, and so I think you absolutely need to be seeing this card at least in your side deck. It's definitely found its way back into the meta. Call by, I'd really be tempted to put it in Better Habit. There's so many combo decks that I feel like are dominating the format. If you're playing Branded, Vanadium, Infernoble, any deck that searches, even Cash, any deck that really searches a lot, and you have a free slot in your deck, I feel like Call By is that type of card that you better have it. I'm going to put it in Great to See because I do know there are some decks that don't necessarily, I think you have to have it. I think there's just too many really floodgatey hand traps that you absolutely need to have answers for in this format that I think Call By is really, even though it's a one of and it is situational, I think it's the only situational card that I say you better have it. It's so impactful to stop things like Shifter. I know, of course, going second, it loses a lot of its value against some of the Floodgate type effects, but going first this card can straight up save your turn and save you the duel. So I think you absolutely have to have this card. Chalice, I don't really see Chalice's place in the meta currently. I don't know if the targeting effect like this is super good at the moment. I'd say it's, I don't want to say it's dog water, but I'm going to put it in dog water, but I don't think it's a bad card. I just don't really see the way that the game is kind of evolved. Maybe I could put it in good inside, or maybe I could put it in good inside. I know some people are probably still going to play this for like cash or something to kind of shut down plays. You can even shut down a Chaos Angel with this to then be able to go through the Meridian board. So maybe you could say this is good in the side. I'll put it there because I don't think it's a bad card. Cosmic, I think Cosmic is a really impactful situational card. I understand why some people main this card in this format. It hits Rika, it hits Branded, it hits Vanadium, it hits any deck, Labyrinth even, to be able to snipe certain cards if they've set them. It hits a lot of rogue matchups. It hits Cash, it hits the Birth and the Field Spell. It hits Purely really hard. Yeah, this card is insane. And I run it at 2 in my main right now because I think having the ability to beat back row in the deck that I'm playing, I think was really important. Being able to snipe certain cards, even hitting Runic Fountain and things like that, is just super strong. I understand why some people are maining it. I am personally maining it. It is really impactful in the right situation. I think it's definitely worthy of you taking a look at it. At a minimum, it needs to be in the side, but I think you could honestly look at it as a really good card in the main. Now, Crossout is kind of in the same vein here, where it's a really strong situational card. There are tons of combo decks going around right now, and if you're playing something like Vanadium or Infernoble to a lesser extent, because you can theoretically rip the Droll if they have Droll, but if you're playing Vanadium and you really want to like fulfill the FTK, there might be maining Crossout. I can't lie. People are going to start maining Droll because of these decks, and those decks are going to start maining or siding Droll in order to beat, Crossout in order to beat the Droll. This makes the FTK go through almost 99% of the time because Droll's like one of the few cards that can stop them, because if they can keep searching, they theoretically can just like continue to find the pieces that they need to put up that type of board. And so I think Crossout is really strong. If you're playing at a big event, you're absolutely going to want this. I think you should main it at that point because people are going to be maining Droll in order to steal those game ones that people don't necessarily side for. Or don't really prepare for because they want to put everything in the side. Sometimes you have to take those risks in the main because people are going to try to steal those game ones. Shifter, if you're playing cash, it's really solid. Like, this card's incredible. It's a tier 1 hand trap. It still hits a lot of decks in the format. Vanadium is like the only of the combo decks that can really play through it. Well, Adventurous Synchron can also kind of play through it, but this does shut down so many different decks that it's still really impactful. There's no telling just how strong Cash will be by the time regionals roll around, but if it is still that strong, maybe if this card's still at 3, it's probably going to be here for its lifespan. Dark Hole, I think, is good in the side. I think this is just a really strong blowout card. It's a non-once per turn, destroy all monsters on the field. The only deck that this is really bad against is Purely because they'll put up the Noir. Against everything else, being able to wipe the board is really impactful. Against Branded, it can be kind of difficult because they can simply destroy all your monsters during the end phase if you out something like Mirror Jade, or they just get value because stuff was sent to the graveyard anyways. But if you can find like an OTK, like if you're playing Vanadium or you're playing like Infernoble or you're playing Purely and you just drop this and you can nuke the field, you usually can find an OTK line on that turn, and this card becomes incredibly broken. The only thing is that it doesn't beat the things like the Calamity Locks and the straight FTKs. Like, this does not beat Branded's Gimmick Puppet, and it does not beat the Calamity, so you do have to take that into account if your opponent is playing that type of deck. This is not the type of card you're going for anyways. Dark Ruler is in such a weird spot, man, because the decks that it's good against, it's incredible. It's great to see, more than likely, or situational, but against a deck like Vanadium, which is more than likely searching the counter trap every time, or just going for the Calamities lock, this card becomes useless because, or against Branded, you just have lost the game before you've even got a chance to get to your main phase. But against decks like even some things like Purely, Mikenko, any deck that wants to put interruptions on the board, this card becomes really potent if they don't have a way to stop it. But I don't know if you can necessarily say you better have it, because you are going to be running into a lot of Branded and Vanadium, and when those types of decks exist, and even Purely, when those types of decks exist, you can't necessarily blindly main this card and feel great about it in every matchup, but I still think it is a really impactful card. Droll is just kind of like worse Bestials because you have to discard it to grave. So in any situation where you might want this card, you might be under like a Shifter or a Macrocosmos, and then it becomes useless. Maybe it's not Dog Water, but I just don't see it being more. I don't see it being better than any of the cards I've listed so far, or any other cards I'll put above it. So I think Droll is kind of Dog Water in this format. It just doesn't really feel that great. Droll, I think you better have it. I think this is a main deckable card. If you go to a big tournament, people are going to be stealing game ones and winning game ones guaranteed with FTKs. That's how they go. And if you don't have this for Vanadium, you just lose. It's really, really tough. There's still a lot of combo decks like Infernoble. People are playing Super Heavy Samurai Brew, still the engine in some decks where Droll can be really impactful. I think just for the Vanadium matchup alone, so you don't just lose to that deck, which is the most represented combo deck right now, you have to absolutely be playing this card. It sucks against Cash because most of the time they can shifter you, but if they don't shifter you and you resolve Droll against Cash, it's still also good. I think Droll back in that main deckable slot again, similar to the Super Heavy Samurai format where you just let them play. They basically put up an unbeatable board. Vanadium does basically the same thing, except they put Calamity on the board, so it's even better. Droplet. Droplet is, I want to put it in situational. I'm going to say good inside, maybe. The only reason why is because this is actually one of the few cards that can theoretically stop the Calamity lock. If you have like Imperm in your hand, a trap in your hand, and you can use this in the draw phase to not lose to the counter trap, you can actually stop the Calamity lock with the Droplet, which is actually good. But the fact that it's really only useful when you open another trap and only really against that deck, I don't really know how good Droplet is. It's useless against Cash, of course, because you have to send it to Graveyard. In theory, if you're playing like Labyrinth, this card is actually good in that matchup because you play a bunch of traps. You could shut down the Crimson Dragon and still be able to play, but in that same vein, you can literally just set your cards and then play on your opponent's turn anyway. So like, I don't really know how impactful Droplet would be, other than being able to maybe play through their board even on your turn and then still be able to set cards. So maybe in some decks people will find use for it, maybe it'll see an appearance, but only for that situation. I don't know if it's necessarily that good. Duster, I think it's good inside. I think it's like the best card inside right now. You could even maybe main this if you're really scared of back row. But Lab is going to be around, Runic's going to be around, Rescue Ace is going to be around. Forcing those types of decks, whether they're activating stuff, you know, in response to Duster or not, to use their effects before they want to is super important. Always going to be super important. So I think Duster is always going to be great in the side. Eclipse, I haven't seen anybody using Eclipse this format. I haven't seen anybody consider it, so I just am assuming people are forgetting about it, that it's not that great anymore. And I think that's kind of correct. I don't, again, in a similar vein, you can use this to maybe stop the Calamity lock because I don't know if Crimson Dragon reads that it has to return its face up self to the grave, to the extra deck. If the ruling is that it has to be face up to return itself, then this can also be used to maybe stop the Calamity lock, but you just lose to reframing. So it's just, it doesn't really feel that great. I think I understand why people aren't really taking a look at it. I don't think it's that good right now. Now, Eradicator is more of a tech card. It's not a hand trap or a board breaker, but I think if you are a deck that can play this card, you kind of have to have it. It's super strong. Like it's an FTK, it's a Floodgate, and unfortunately in the meta that we're in, where you're battling against people who are trying to Floodgate you kind of have to Floodgate them back. I think this card's more situational because it just doesn't apply to every deck. Like there's not a lot of decks can play this. Things like Dragon Link, Branded, Vanadium, Labyrinth can freely play this card because within Engine they can end on a monster that just meets this requirement. And if you resolve this against the right deck, you just win on the spot. So I think this is still a card that's probably great to see, but because it's strictly a sideboard card, I think it has to go in situational. Xyz Encore, I think is good in the side if you're really scared of the Purely matchup. I think this is the better way to beat the Noir than the Heralds of the Abyss, which I'm still going to put in good inside because I still think this card's decent because it hits more than just Purely. It can hit everything. So if you're looking for more of a generic card where you can like out a Rise Heart with this card, that's fine too. Whereas this card you need, anyways, I guess Rise Heart was a bad example, but if you need to out a specific monster, you can do that with this card. Like you can out Chaos Angel and all of a sudden now you can click through a Vanadium board, etc, etc. So like This card is still generically good because it can hit a lot of things, but this is definitely better exclusively for the purely matchup. Evenly is great to see this format. I think people are sleeping on it a little bit because of the amount of negate boards that are being put out there. But if you're playing against any deck that's not Vanadium, this card goes absolutely crazy. Other than like Infernoble, a rogue matchup, this card goes insane. This is insane against Rescue Ace. This is insane against Labyrinth. This is insane against Runic. This is insane against Branded. This is insane against literally every deck but like 2 or 3. And for decks that need that extra help going second, I can even see people still maybe not going back to playing this in the main. I don't necessarily think it's good enough in the main anymore, but in the side, this is like one of the best going second side cards. It's easily better than Dark Ruler, where Dark Ruler is definitely more situational. I think I'm going to move Dark Ruler to situational, simply because Vanadium is going to be so popular. I think you're just going to get beat by it way too often running the Dark Ruler, so I'll put it there for now. But yeah, I think Evenly is just insane this format. Chaos Hunter is, it's super situational. Like, the only deck I can see running this is Runic, and they're not even using this as Runic Sprite, and they're not even using this as a hand trap. They're strictly using it as a mannequin cat target, so I don't really think this card's good. Like, this card's good, but I don't necessarily know how like crazy it is. Imperm I think is great to see. I think you could honestly put it in Better Habit, maybe, but I think there's another card that I think you could put in Better Habit over Imperm, but I think this is like the best card that's great to see. I think actually it's, you better have it. I think this card's so good because it trades with pretty much every deck and it doesn't play into talents, and that alone is super good. The only decks that can like dodge this super effectively is like Vanadium. If they open with a normal summon of Rykart, sometimes you have to kind of just let that resolve. You don't want to Imperm it, because if they just go Ream Heart, you've wasted an Imperm. But this card as a 6th card, or as a hand trap to shut down some lines. Like, sometimes you can tell when a branded player is desperate for their branded fusion, and you can just use the Imperm there, and that's super impactful. Not playing into talents is also super huge. I think Imperm is like the best generic hand trap you can run, simply because Ash does play into talents a little bit, and that can hurt. Kelbeck is really situational. It only goes in like one deck, so I just kind of put it in here because it was in the file. Cara, I think it's great to see. I think this is the best sideboard card of the format, maybe. This card is just gross. Like, it beats pretty much every board. The only board it doesn't beat is necessarily the Calamities. You contribute off the Calamities, but you can't do anything else because you can't interact with the rest of their negates. But this card's just insane against any matchup that puts some monsters on their end board. Being able to just pick them off and go for OTKs, super good. You absolutely need this card. Of course, against the cash matchup, it's just freak. It's like a free game, so it's just way too good. Lancey I think is dog water. I just don't think there's a reason to run Lancey right now. Even if you're playing a deck like Drytron where it's searchable, I don't think you're actually playing this unless you're really scared of cash. And even then, I don't really know how impactful that is. But yeah, Lava Golem. I had a hard time deciding on Lava Golem because the card does feel like it should be good. You have a lot of boards that go wide this format, right? But when you really think about it, is it really that good? Like, again, against Vanadium, you have to take into account the FTKs. Is this card really that good if you just get FTK'd on the spot? I think it's good in the side. It does tribute 2. So against wider boards, it's usually a safer bet, because wider boards, if they really want to go wide or play under something like Sphere Mode, they'll usually go for 2. But, like, is this better than Cara? Where you can just, anytime a monster tribute, like, if they only go for 1 monster, you can still go Cara. If you can only bait 1 negate, you could still go Cara. Whereas Lava Golem, you need to be able to tribute 2. So, like, I don't know. I think Cara is just strictly better at this point. Even Kaijus, I think, are better at this point. Lightning Storm, I have heard some good things about Lightning Storm. I honestly have never used Lightning Storm to effect. Every time I run this card, I feel like I never see it, and it's bad. But based on what I'm seeing, a lot of decks are actually running this card enough for me to put it here towards the bottom end. I'm seeing a lot of topping lists running this card it's at 2 with a Duster in the side to help beat these blowout decks, and I think it's good, like, no doubt about it. But I guess for the cost of not having to use your battle phase as well, being able to potentially clear Labyrinth's back row is also really important. So maybe Lightning Storm is really that good. Again, I've never really used it to effect, but I'm going to put it here just based on what I've seen in the representation. The Bestials, The Bistros are incredible. This is great against Vanadium. If you shut them off of Vsauce access, it really hurts them. Good against Branded, because unless they can set up the Retribution, if they can go full combo, you can snipe out, or you can just snipe the Albion if they go to set the Retribution. You can just be able to snipe the monster that they're trying to special summon the Gimmick Puppet, so you don't lose to that lock. Also just good against Branded in general to shut down some of their plays. Of course, in decks like Dragon Link it's really good, and against Dragon Link it's really good. These cards are just really strong, and they're still full power, so if you're a deck that can take advantage of the Bistros, you absolutely need to. They're just really versatile this format. Ghost Mourner, I know Cash is probably still going to play this card. I know Purely plays this card, so I'm going to say it's situational. This card's still good. Like, there are targets where, like, if you can hit a certain monster, it's good. I just don't know if the 1-for-1 trades while playing into Talents is better, where if you really want to trade 1-for-1, you can just go Imperman and not play into Talents. So I think maybe Ghost Mourner is situational just because there are two really good decks that still use it, but I think there's just a strictly better option for every other deck. Nibiru, I have no idea, man. I have no idea. Nibiru is like one of the more divisive cards because it's either terrible because every deck that you expect to play into it doesn't play into it or plays a combo that plays around it, or it's the best card of all time because every combo player you play is kind of stupid and they play into it every single chance that they get. It's kind of hard to gauge because if Kashtira is still a really popular card, I think this is strictly a sideboard card because you just don't want to lose by drawing into this against Cash. But if you're playing against something like Vanadium, or you're playing against something like even Branded, or you're playing against Infernoble, there's just so many decks where you can just try to use this card and they've set up a negate before it's useful. So I don't really know how I feel about Nib. Maybe it's great to see. I think a lot of people are playing it, so it justifies me putting it high, but it's a card that when people start to expect it, it becomes much worse. And if people are starting to expect it at this point, it's not as good as what this list is gonna put it as. Raigeki, I feel like it's just worse Dark Hole, but it's still an okay card. I just don't know why you'd play it over Dark Hole, so I'm just gonna put it in Dark Water. I just think you'd play this card instead. Sphere Mode for really similar reasons to Lava Golem, but the fact that you need one more monster to tribute makes it that much worse. I think this is good against Vanadium actually, because if they do Calamities you, most of the time that end board is going to look like Beach Balkan, the Calamities, and the Baron, and you can just tribute all three of those monsters and put a Sphere Mode on and then hope that you can survive and win from there. So maybe it's okay, but I don't really know if you want to put that in there just for the sake of the FTK, considering most people know FTKs get worse post-side, so what's the value in that? Super Poly. This might be a bold take. I think Super Poly is super good. If you're a deck, like even Vanquish Soul, like if you're a deck that can afford to play Super Poly, it goes crazy this format. Because you don't lose to the Calamity Lock either, because you can just Super Poly away the Crimson Dragon and the Baron before they can even activate the Crimson Dragon's effect, and then boom, you don't have to worry about being Calamities locked. Now it's usually just like Dispater, I think, maybe on their end board, and that's pretty easy to beat over, considering it's not even all the time a negate. This card goes absolutely nuts against that matchup. If you can go to the Draco Knight, whatever, the card that was on the cover of like Duelist Revolution or whatever, that card's crazy. Super Poly completely breaks that board in half, and then also beats the Branded FTK as well, because you can just Super Poly away the Rebellion before it gets a chance to activate its effect. So yeah, Super Poly is just always going to be a good card, and in a format where the FTKs can get beat by it, I think its value is that much better. We're gonna go to Valor last. Valor's pretty good because Purely can play it. It's like a non-once per turn monster negate, but similar to, I guess when putting Ghost Mourner that high, I have to put Effect Bearer that high because I think it's kind of similar reasons. But the fact that this is non-once per turn maybe makes it a little bit better, but it's a trade-off, but only in the main phase for the fact that you play into Talents. So like, I don't know, and it has to be discarded to Grave, so I don't know. But people do play it, like plenty of decks do still play Effect Bearer, so maybe it's a little bit better. Thrust is great to see. I think this is like one of the better side cards. I'd say it's like maybe like the third best side card. I'd say it's maybe the second best side card because not every deck can play Visuals, and pretty much any deck can play Thrust. This card's just insane. Tutoring any spell trap that you need, normal spell trap that you need. Going first, it gives you the option to go for the blowouts like Eradicator and Dimensional Barrier and Karma Cannon, Going second, it gets you into evenly matched, it gets you into engine pieces for so many decks, it gets you into Lightning Storm, it gets you into Herald of the Abyss, it gets you into literally any blowout card that you can think of. The card's just freaking fantastic. I think it's just ridiculously strong in this format. People have to respect you by playing hand traps. I think we're in more of a hand trap format than a board breaker format, and when that's the case, Thrust has value blind first and in the side, so it's really strong. And then talents, I think you better have talents. I think this card's insane, this format. Similar in the same vein as Thrust. This is the reason why talents is good. It's just the fact that sometimes being drawn in the main phase can hurt, but this card's just too versatile. It's even under Droll. Like, if you couldn't rip a card out of your opponent's hand and you find out they had 3 hand traps and only 1 starter and an extender, and you rip their starter, now they're on top deck alert. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many things you can do with this card. Going second, it clears a monster most of the time to just take to either win a game or just link it out to get rid of a problem card. It's just really good, and people aren't going to blindly main hand traps, so you definitely need talents. I think this card's just way too good. Maybe not a 3, but at least a 2. I think it's a card that you desperately need in your deck this format. So that is going to do it for the tier list today. I hope you all enjoyed. Please sound off in the comments below any cards that I might have missed. I'm sure I might have missed something. Let me know what you guys think, any opinions you have. What decks are y'all running in this Duelist Nexus format? Please make sure to like, comment, subscribe. We're so close to 1K. We're really trying to get consistent with the content. Hope y'all have a beautiful rest of your day. Peace, y'all.